Yeah, I don't believe it's a quagmire. And this is a war that we didn't choose. This is a war that we didn't want. This is a war that was imposed on us. People forget that Saudi Arabia was instrumental in bringing about a transition in Yemen from former President Ali Abdullah Saleh to a transitional government. We brought Yemenis from all walks of life in what is called the National Dialogue. They discussed the future of Yemen. They came up with a vision of Yemen that would be a federal system, and they plotted out their future. And then they chose a group to write the constitution. And then the Houthis struck. They moved from Saada to Amran, and they took over Sana'a in a coup, and they declared themselves in charge of Yemen. The president of Yemen was imprisoned in his house. He was able to escape and go to Aden and called for support, and we responded based on Article 51 of the UN Charter. There was no way that we were going to allow a radical militia allied with Iran and Hezbollah in possession of ballistic missiles and an air force to take over a country that is strategically important to the world and that is our neighbor. And so we responded to reverse the coup that the Houthis staged. And over the past 3.5 years, 4 years, almost 4 years, the Houthi control of Yemen has shrunk from 80% to 20%. The Houthis have lobbed 197 ballistic missiles at our cities, and they have fired more than 200 ballistic missiles at Yemeni cities, and I don't see outrage. The Houthis have laid siege on towns and villages and stopped food and water from coming into those villages. As a consequence, people starve. We get blamed. The Houthis prevent the World Health Organization or delay their entry into areas controlled by them to vaccinate people with cholera vaccine that we paid for. And when cholera breaks out, people blame us. And I don't see outrage at the Houthis. The Houthis use boys who are 8, 9, 10, 11, put them into battle. We capture them, we rehabilitate them, we send them back to their families, and we get blamed. The Houthis randomly plant mines all over the country, and people lose life and limb, and nobody says anything. We get blamed for it. When we have operations where a mistake is made or we think a mistake is made, we investigate, we announce the results of the investigation, and we pay compensation, which is what you do according to international humanitarian law. The Houthis, none of this. They assassinate political leaders, including the former president. No outrage. The Houthis have made more than 70 agreements, and they haven't fulfilled or lived up to any of them, and we get blamed. We support the UN political process. We support the UN envoy, whether it was Ismail Wald Sheikh or whether it's Martin Griffith. The Houthis talk one thing and nothing happens, and we get blamed. So I tell people, before you rush to judgment and accuse us of something, what other option did we have? Do we want a Hezbollah-controlled country on our southern border? No, not going to happen. Do we want a Hezbollah-controlled country controlling access to the Red Sea, where more than 10% of the world trade takes place? No. Do we want to give Yemen to the Iranians? No. 10% of the Yemeni population, as we speak, lives in Saudi Arabia. We have incredible ties with Yemen, historic and familial ties and political ties. And we expect that once this war is over, and it will be over, that we will be able to go back and reconstruct Yemen and turn them into a good partner of ours. We have provided Yemen with $13 billion in humanitarian assistance since the war began, which is more than the rest of the world combined. We have set aside $10 billion that we will increase to $20 billion for a fund for the reconstruction of Yemen. We have an office that's already looking at what projects to do in Yemen and how we can fast-track them once the war comes to an end. And we hope that the Houthis will accept a political solution, because we have said from the very beginning that the solution to this problem is a political solution, not a military one, based on the outcome, based on the GCC initiative, the outcome of the Yemeni National Dialogue, and UN Security Council 2216. Very simple. The Houthis have every right to be part of the Yemeni political system, but they have no right to dominate the country. And we're hoping that as the military pressure continues to build on them, that they will come to the negotiating table and make a deal that they could have made 3 years ago. And so it took an international coalition of more than 60 countries, including the world's great powers, the US and France and Germany and England and Australia, and you name them, 5 years, if not 6, before they were able to turn the dial against ISIS in Syria. So when people say, it's been 3.5 years or so, this has gone on too long, what about the fight against ISIS in Syria, of which we were a founding member? So these things take time. And you hope that your opponent or enemy would be wise enough to recognize that it's better to make a deal than to keep on fighting. So we're not against a political settlement. We've supported every initiative for a political settlement. It's the Houthis who said no. Now, we lost the communications battle from the beginning. And that's why our reputation has taken a big hit. That's why there's a lot of public pressure on governments from NGOs and from media and so forth about this war. But I think people are not realistic in looking at this picture. And my question is usually, what other option did we have? There was no other option.
You mentioned the need for a political resolution. The Houthis walked out of the UN-led talks in Geneva a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
The UAE has said that they would re-engage in a political process. I assume Saudi Arabia is always ready to engage on that process. Do you see a UN-led political process having any viability in the medium term, near to medium term?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic. I'm an optimist. I always tell people that if your job is to solve problems, you have to be an optimist. If you're a pessimist, you can't be a diplomat, you should be a journalist. With all due respect to journalists, because you can write things, you can express your pessimism, but if, as a diplomat, I'm pessimistic, why am I doing this job? If I don't think a problem can be solved, why am I even tackling it? So yes, I believe the UN process is the only viable process for a resolution of this. We have great respect for Martin Griffith. I think he's approaching it the right way. We had great respect for Ismail Wald-Sheikh. And I think with continued perseverance, I think we will get there.
Thank you.